those cases where I really think that this person was abducted. There are cases that I come across where I think, oh, maybe they did run away to start, not start a new life, but, this girl was taken. I really think so. So I look forward to your responses in the comments, and we'll see if you agree with me. Anyway, hold on. I've got a little friend here. Hey, quit. Silly Nelly. Now she's looking at me like I killed her. Ooh. And we're grumbly. Anyway, we are going to talk about Rachel Cooke. She was born on May 10th of 1982 in Dallas, Texas, to Robert and Janet Cooke. She was a beautiful young lady of 5'2" and 110 pounds, with hazel eyes and blonde hair with auburn streaks. When Rachel disappeared, she had no known enemies, and she had a very loving, gentle, carefree personality that really made her a hit with darn near everybody that she met. But everyone that comes across this case thinks that someone abducted her. But the question is, who and why? Rachel Cooke had one particular passion, and it was running. She was really big into cross country and into track. Her mom said that she could just keep going and going and going like the Energizer Bunny, which I used to call my mom. She used to run circles around me. Now, Rachel loved to run in her hometown in Texas, but she was always drawn to California. She felt like it was the land of vegetarians, good music, and beaches. So if you live in California, you'll have to tell me if that's true or not, because I've never been there, although it's on my list. So Rachel enrolled in community college on the coastline near San Diego, and there she met Greg West. He gave an interview and he said, "I thought we were so goofy together, it was incredible, and she was amazing, and I thought it was the real thing." Her mom said she was with Greg and she was very happy, and her sister said that she said he was the one. The couple made plans to move in together, and Rachel invited him home to Texas for the Christmas holiday in 2001. Unfortunately, Greg could not stay the entire trip. He had to go back to San Diego for work, and Rachel planned to stay with her family for a few more days. She had a wedding that she wanted to attend. But as far as anybody knows, she never made it back to San Diego at all. On the morning of January 10th, 2002, Rachel, after being woken up by her mom leaving for work, went for a run. She dressed in a gray t-shirt, a green sports bra, gray shorts, and white tennis shoes. She slipped on her bright yellow Walkman and went for a jog. Her mom remembers leaving for work and her sister saying, "Mom, don't wake her up," and that she went over and kissed her anyway and said, "Love you, bye." But she just grumbled her response, and she, was sleeping, and she was like, "Leave me alone, Mom." Rachel's father, Robert, also left for work that morning, leaving Rachel with the house to herself. She did talk to Greg that morning around 9 or 9:15, and he asked her if she was going out for a run, and, she was happy to talk to him and chatting, and said that she was gonna go, running, and he said, "Okay, that's cool, just call me afterwards." So she suited up and went for a run, planning on coming home and spending the rest of the day with her dad. They were going to go shopping, I guess, for that wedding. So Rachel began her run in the quiet, rural, familiar, crime-free neighborhood where she grew up. And I'm going to apologize if I'm a little wheezy. I had a coughing fit at work today, and now I feel like there's something stuck. So she saw this sports car that I talked about earlier, and this truck stopped to talk to a different jogger shortly right after Rachel disappeared. So, a lot of cars and a lot of confusion, but I always want to mention everything that I find. Now, Robert Jody was just recently elected the sheriff of Williamson County. He is the third sheriff to oversee the case of Rachel Cooke, and he has a lot of stuff to go through. And there are many people that will tell you that a mess was just thrown into his lap. Rachel's former boyfriend said, "What they told me during my questioning is that they truly think that she just took off with somebody. She's a young, beautiful woman, and I was confused. How does that make sense? She was living her dream life in San Diego, and we had all these plans. Why would she come back to Texas and then run away?" Now, we all know, and we know I don't like it, but it's common practice in many jurisdictions to wait 24 hours to start a missing person investigation. But the Cookes started their own investigation even before the police. They were smart, I think. They called hospitals and friends. Robert even went and started driving the route that she used to run. And they called the restaurant where Rachel had picked up a couple waitressing shifts while she was in town. And that actually turned out to be a really cruel twist of fate, because they called and they said, "Hey, is Rachel working there tonight?" And they said, "Yeah." What they didn't realize is that was not Rachel Cooke. This was a different Rachel. So they lost some time there. And by the time the police really got serious about the case, it was too late. Rachel's perplexing case went into an investigative deep freeze. And I find it really surprising, but the police brought in a lot of people to work on this case. The FBI, the Rangers, the Austin police. When I see how many people came in, I feel like some of these other cases get so neglected that we talk about. And reportedly, many of these people are still disappointed that our case is unsolved. They have had over 17,000 tips. And they're trying to track down every single lead, which obviously, sometimes tips are not really good, but they have well over 100 persons of interest in this case. Now, it has been said that this mystery is tainted by crappy police work, but they're not going to give up. And the newly minted Sheriff Jody, C-H-O-D-Y, is starting from scratch, and he's starting with that staggering list of 100 people, and they are re-interviewing all of these people who were interviewed the first time. But some people don't want to speak anymore, for whatever reason, and this includes some of Rachel's family members, and I find that really weird. Apparently, one of the former sheriffs would not allow the Cookes to be questioned, which I find very strange, because in a lot of these cases, we find that it was someone close to them, or, if you can't question the family about who she's friends with or who she's involved with, how do you find your answers? Either way, I guess this former sheriff knew that they had nothing to do with it, so he wouldn't allow them to be questioned at all. But I did find one weird thing. Her father actually took a polygraph, which I thought that was kind of odd because they didn't want them to be questioned, but he took a polygraph. Either way, he failed this polygraph. One question, and the explanation given to this by Sheriff Jody was, the question was, "Do you know where Rachel is?" And the answer was no, and he failed. And Janet says that he believes that Rachel is in heaven, so he believes in his most weird aspect of this case to me actually involves a career criminal named Michael Keith Moore. Michael Keith Moore stunned investigators when he decided to come forward and confess to the murder of Rachel Cooke. He said that he kidnapped her and killed her and dumped her body in the Houston area. He said that he attacked her while she was jogging, knocked her out, assaulted her, and then wrapped her body in a tarp and threw it in the bay. Now, Mr. Moore has an extensive criminal history, and he has spent nearly all of his adult life in prison. His father stated that he started to get in trouble with the law at the age of 13, and many of his known offenses involve sexual misconduct and violence. At the time of his confession about Rachel's mystery, I'm not going to say murder because we don't know, he was already in police custody after being convicted of murdering a pregnant woman. This was the break and the closure that the cops and family members and the entire community hoped for, right? Her sister Joanne said that they brought her in and told her that some of the things that he was saying said it sounded like facts and that it led them to believe that he was telling the truth. Former boyfriend Greg West said, "I couldn't believe it. I remember the first time that I saw his face and I saw just pure evil. I don't know that I believed him or not, but he wrote a very detailed story about what he did, and just hearing those things was too much." Mr. Moore was out of prison at the time of Rachel's disappearance and actually lived nearby, so his involvement did seem plausible. And he struck a deal with prosecutors to plead guilty in her murder. They went to court. It was a packed courtroom 4 years after Rachel Cooke vanished. And everyone assembled. Mr. Moore was ready to enter into the plea agreement, but he stood up and pled not guilty. His reversal rocked that courtroom, and the judge actually asked him to repeat what he had said. Not guilty. Mr. Moore told the media that he had been toying with authorities when he confessed to killing Rachel, and that he got special treatment in prison for exchange with his cooperation, in exchange for his cooperation. He stated that he had nothing to do with her disappearance, and if the police had done their job, they would have known that. Sheriff Jody said, "The fact that he admitted it and then denied it shows you what type of personality and what kind of monster he really is. He got a free ride to the coast, got to eat some cheeseburgers, and, got some sunshine, got out of his cell for a little bit." The district attorney could not pursue the case against Moore, and it was dropped. And I feel like that's a terrible thing to do to people, but weird. For Janet and Joanne, her mom and her sister, there's not really an expiration date on the pain that they feel. And her sister Joanne is really not sure that she even wants to hear the truth anymore. She said, "I think that's the one thing that makes me feel very different from my mom, because I think she feels like finding something out will bring closure and relief, whereas I feel like it'll just be one of those things that I don't want to see, that I don't want to know are true." Unfortunately, there's another tragic turn in all of this. Rachel's father, Robert, passed away after a long illness and went to his grave never knowing what happened to her. Her sister said, "I know he felt like he failed her, that he wasn't there and he didn't protect her, but I don't think that at all." I feel like most dads are always out to protect their little girls, and this guy had a broken heart, poor thing. Sheriff Jody said that despite frustrations and setbacks and the missteps of the previous administration, he vows to forge ahead. We actually have 4 investigators on her case, and it is all they do is work on Rachel's case. And Michael Keith Moore is very well placed on Jody's list. Now, with 100 persons of interest and not a single eyewitness or speck of physical evidence, it's going to take a lot more than aggressive police work. And Sheriff Jody wants the public to share the workload. He believes that it's a solvable case. We just have to get that information. So, in the bottom below, I'll post in the description box the information. If you saw anything or heard anything or know anything, please, even anonymously, report it. I don't know what's going on with me today. They believe that somewhere, someone is going to mess up. They've kept this secret for so long, eventually they're going to mess up. Someone's going to tell somebody, an ex-boyfriend and an ex-girlfriend, and that person's going to come forward and say something, and finally the truth will come out. In 2017, investigators received a tip about possible human remains buried in a field that might belong to Rachel. In fact, the tip was not only specific to the fact that there were possible remains of a human in that area, but the name Rachel Cooke was actually specifically brought up. Prior to digging, cadaver dogs did detect the scent of human remains, but they dug for hours and never found anything. Then, in April of 2018, investigators announced a possible break in the case. They had located and impounded a car that matched the description of the one seen in the neighborhood the morning of her disappearance. The car is a white Pontiac Trans Am, and they found it in Dallas. This car is linked to 3 or 4 of the people of interest in her case. They feel like if there's evidence in the vehicle, that they're confident that it could still be good. They said that if the victim was placed in the trunk of the car, the possibility of finding DNA is very real. Apparently, and I did not know this, but I'm learning as I go here, trunks tend to be less contaminated by other sources of DNA than the inside of a car, which makes sense. It's apparently very hard to get rid of blood and other bodily fluids left in a trunk. You could rip up the carpet, but you'd still have to clean all of the metal work and the cracks underneath it, which is apparently very difficult to do and something I will never know in my lifetime. Williamson County District Attorney Sean Dick said that while the county is working several leads, the car, being the only tangible piece of evidence so far in the investigation, is creating renewed hope in the case. That was a very long name. However, he says they still have concerns. Obviously, evidence degrades over time. There's concerns you have about what kind of contamination could be included. So we leave it to the experts to go through and process and figure out where science takes us. Forensic expert and former director of forensic science at the Austin Police Department, Mark Gillespie, agrees and says while it's possible, finding usable DNA in the car could be somewhat challenging. Time doesn't become a factor unless you're talking about the environment. Because after 16 years of sitting in the Texas weather, the heat and the cold, and not that Texas gets a lot of cold, I don't believe, could degrade the DNA. However, Gillespie says other pieces of evidence such as fiber, soil, and even plant matter could be helpful in gaining answers in this case as well. He said that a thorough search could even find fingerprints still in place from more than half a decade ago. It's not impossible, but you have to consider what's taken place inside the vehicle and who's been in it. Remember, we did a case earlier, and I don't remember exactly which one it was because we've had Williamson County and FBI forensic analysts spent hours collecting possible evidence. Preliminary tests have been released, and they do indicate the possible presence of blood on the passenger floorboard and passenger door molding of this car. I have not been able to find any more details on whether or not it was identified as Rachel Cooke's blood. Everything I found said that they would not release the full details because they were trying to protect the integrity of the investigation. Now, there's one more thing I'm going to mention, and then we'll talk about how I feel about this case. There was a disappeared episode about Rachel Cooke, and they mention an ex-boyfriend that I believe, and don't quote me on this, she saw him at a party or something, and he showed up at the house at like 3 a.m. screaming and yelling. I don't know his name. I don't know if he showed up before or after she disappeared because I did not watch that episode, but I feel like in all the years that she's been missing, why hasn't this guy been brought up? Maybe he's one of the people of interest. I don't know, but I feel like you have to look down every avenue when it's cases like this. So, there's some discussion that she was abducted, but how did they get her in the car without anybody noticing or hearing anything, seeing anything, doing anything? Somebody said, well, maybe she was tasered. No, I've never been tasered, but you can't touch them right afterwards, right? Does anybody know this? If they tasered her and picked her up and threw her in the car, wouldn't they get shocked too? I don't really know how that works. But I guess maybe lots of people do have tasers. I feel like that's not something people just have, but they probably do. I mean, maybe not in 2002. I think that somebody drove up next to her, and it was somebody that she knew, and they were like, hey, let's go do something. Or maybe they said, hey, oh my god, Rachel, you're so-and-so, mom, brother, sister, whatever, is in the hospital. We have to go right now. And she just jumped in the car without thinking twice, and whoever it was heard her. I think it's weird that the former sheriff did not question the family at all. I mean, there's a difference between questioning people as a suspect and questioning people to further your investigation. And I think that was a mistake because maybe that's why we don't know about this ex-boyfriend. I've never, ever heard of a case where the family wasn't questioned, at least in some aspect. I don't know. I just think it's really, really strange, and I'm curious to know what you guys think. I feel badly for her father, who devoted the rest of his life to finding her and never found anything. I can't. No one should ever have to go through that. And for him to feel like he failed her because he should have been there and protected her. I don't have kids, but I do feel like that with my nieces and nephews. I can't imagine feeling like that towards my child. I don't know. I mean, I guess you learn to compartmentalize. I feel like I couldn't sleep because I would be analyzing every single little thing. This is one of those weird cases where there's just no evidence. There's nothing. I really hope that they find something in that car to find whoever did this, and that her family gets answers. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I will see you very, very soon.